everyone to the Food Security Coalition meeting for August 28th. We're sorry that we didn't give more notice on this one. We're announcing a date for September on today's call so that everybody can get that on their calendar. Some folks let us know they couldn't be with us today, but that they would watch a recording of this. We will have some more people find out this same information just a little bit later. In case this is your first time to be on the call and you're not all that familiar with Empower Missouri, we've been around since 1901 when we were founded as the Missouri Conference on Charities and Corrections. We work to secure basic human needs and equal justice for every person in our state through coalition building and advocacy. And we envision a Missouri in which all people have food, shelter, and justice. We believe adequate nutrition, affordable housing, and equal justice are essential for Missouri's success, that those are the building blocks that we have to have in place. We believe that all structural oppressions must be recognized, challenged, and dismantled, that evidence-based public policy is foundational for those who govern, and that the lawmaking process should be truly accessible to all in our state. We try to keep you informed on what's happening in Washington, D.C. and in Jefferson City on the issues of affordable housing and homelessness, criminal justice, economic justice, health and mental health, human rights, and food security. And we staff coalitions on housing, criminal justice, and food security. So that's a little bit about who we are. We're very thankful to have some great national partners, and we try to highlight each of those national partners when we have coalition calls, sort of rotating through the folks that we work with at the national level. Today we're featuring Bread for the World, a wonderful national partner. We've worked with a variety of bread folks, and many of you have had contact with Zach Schmidt, who works with our state in particular. Today we have Chonya Johnson, who's on the government relations team. She's a former policy advisor who worked for over 2 decades in the United States Congress, and her firsthand experiences there gave her deep insights into the concerns of advocates, constituents, and businesses because of what she saw out of the intricacies of government practices. And I know what she means, having served in the Missouri House of Representatives. That taught me some things that have really helped our organization. We also will be hearing from Caitlin Whaley, who's the governmental liaison for the Department of Social Services. She's been there since 2017 and oversees their government relations, constituent services, and communications, and has been working especially to improve their contact through social media. She graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a BA in political communication and a minor in sociology, and has been a consultant, contract lobbyist, and on staff with the House of Representatives. So those are the special guests that we have today. I think we're gonna start from hearing about the national landscape from Chonya.
I think you're on mute, Tanya.
And just a reminder to everyone else, if you will mute when you're not speaking, that will help us hear the person who is talking. So I'm going to mute myself.
Yes, it's habit. I have to mute because I have a 16-year-old in the room who today is orientation. And so I'm like, I got to do this, you got to do that. And so I wanted to make sure that we were on mute and to respect and honor the ears of everyone. But thank you all so much for being a great partner with Bread. Zach did say, hey, Chonya, can you do this? And he knows whenever I can give a national update about what we're doing here in Washington, D.C. I said, yeah, let me go ahead and educate the people and give them some information because that's where my heart is, in local communities who are doing the work every day on the ground. And so I'm, again, super excited to be here with you guys. So again, thank you both for making sure that I got all the information and all of that good stuff. But I did want to start with just, I'm going to be reading, going backwards and forth between my docs and then looking at you. So this is how we do updates. It's not, I have everything up here yet. But in light of COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal lawmakers did try very, very early on to address the issues. And we know that. We know that to date, there have been 5 bills that have passed Congress. 4 of them have become law, and 2 of them are still outstanding. And the 2 that are still outstanding are the 2 that I will give an update on, which is the HEROES Act and the HEALS Act. Well, but I just want to give the audience an idea of when we all started this. So March 17th, we passed the first Congress, I should say, I'm saying we, but that's where I just came from, so I still have to switch hats. But Congress passed the first Coronavirus Preparedness Response Supplemental Appropriation Act. That was done March 6th. March 15th, about in the 15th to the 17th, nationally, we begin to do the shutdown, the lockdown, everybody stay indoors, don't leave your home, you know, and all of that, because we wanted to have maybe a 2 to 3 week shutdown to try to eliminate the virus. There's a lot of different reasons why they said they wanted to do it, but they thought it would slow the virus down. But we know that that didn't happen because everybody didn't do it consistently across these United States. And so we're still dealing with the aftermath or the pandemic right now. And then on March 18th, they passed the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That was passed less than 2 weeks later when they tried to again address lack of PPE, lack of resources for people, for businesses, because they realized after 1 or 2 weeks, businesses are not able to operate, that it was gonna send us in a downturn in our economy. But someone said, hey, we got another one. So they came up with the CARES Act. So 2 weeks after March 18th, they then came up with the CARES Act, which is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Then after that one, they had the Paycheck Protection Act and the healthcare. That one was also to address the lack of PPE, the lack of resources in many of the communities, and to really help businesses who then saw the impact of not having the resources or people at work. And so Congress said, okay, we're gonna do this one more time. And many of us really thought that that would be all that they would have to do, and that we would be able to go return to work, things like that. But of course, the virus or the pandemic was still running rapid in many of our southern states. And so Congress said, okay, we're gonna try to do one more thing. And on May 15th, that's when our House, the United States House of Representatives, passed the HEROES Act. And I'm gonna go through some of the things the HERO Act did as well. And in response to that, the Republicans then said, we have a bill idea, which was the HEALS Act. Now, the Republican bill is $1 trillion. The Democrat bill is $3 billion, $3 trillion. So you can see it's a huge gap in terms of the amount of resources that they want to allocate in each bill. Let me go here, give me 1 second. Here we go. So I'll start with the HEROES, because the HEROES one was passed by Congress. It was passed along party lines. It was initiated by the Democrats in the House. And you had some Republicans who signed on to it, but not an overwhelming number. And then you had the HEALS Act, which was just introduced. Let's see, what date was that? The HEALS Act was just introduced in July. The HEROES was introduced in May. So it took them about 30 days to say, okay, we see what the House is offering. We have an idea. And so they came up with the HEALS. In our community of hunger and poverty, we felt like the HEROES Act would help millions of Americans, help them in terms of food, housing, PPE, unemployment benefits, the stimulus check. And so inside of the HEROES bill, that was pretty much everything that everybody wanted, right? Everybody maybe on the Democratic side, or who are in support of safety net programs. I should say it like that. The actual HEALS bill is considered to be more business interest focused. It does not include anything for housing. It does not include anything for food. It does not include, let me see, those are probably the top 2 areas that I had been following. So for many of us, we're like, okay, come on, HEALS. This is not going to heal America when we know that there are food insecurities all across the USA. We know that people are struggling to pay their rent because they're not able to go to work. We know that our frontline workers and essential workers just are not able to make ends meet. And so we were in support of, you know, the $600 unemployment benefit. We was in support of the 15% SNAP increase in pandemic EBT. And we continue at BREAD to support those issues that would allow for many of our American to be able to make ends meet and not fall deeper into poverty. And so those are the two bills, but I do want to say that the HEROES Act, and I'll just read one of the things they say, that it's a $3 trillion stimulus package in response to COVID and is intended to supplement the earlier CARES Act. The earlier CARES Act had a lot of things in it that we supported, and pretty much the nation supported because it did pass. The president did sign on to it. But somewhere along the line, someone said, no, we don't need this. And so you had more of the businesses, lobbyists asking for additional resources for businesses as opposed to everyday people. Now, because of in its title, the HEROES Act does talk about additional resources for schools. That is a good thing. Yes, we believe schools need to be able to have the resources, but because schools are still, some are online and doing the virtual thing, you still need to figure out how you're going to be able to deliver food to everyday children who are probably not going to be able to make it to the school because maybe the parent is at work, maybe the parent is working from home. There are so many issues with it. And so here on our end, we continue to try and advocate for pandemic EPT, universal school lunches, no matter what your income is. We believe that, you know, in this season during the pandemic, if nothing else, we should have those resources available to families, at least during the pandemic. Now, after the pandemic and the dust has settled, we can kind of revisit whether or not the increase that we've been asking for, which is the 15%, could be in there for the duration and for the long haul. But right now we're saying, hey, we'll take what we can get in terms of it being during the pandemic, at least, because we know millions of families are suffering, are faced with insecurity. And then we have the housing crisis with the eviction moratoriums that are being lifted. What's today, August? Many of them in my county where I live here in Maryland are being lifted at the end of this month. And so a lot of the families are gonna find themselves either having to live with other family members and or going to shelters and or could possibly be homeless. There is no additional relief that I've been able to find from a Red Cross or any other organization that will be able to put these families up because they're not able to make ends meet, particularly their rent or their mortgage. People who have mortgages may be able to go a little bit longer because of the foreclosure processes and things like that. But everyday people who are renters that don't have the income to be able to afford to pay their rent, we know that there are going to be some issues with that. Let's see what else I have. I don't know if I'm answering questions doing this, and if I've given you guys enough regarding the HEROES Act. Just remember that bill for many within the DHN community or domestic needs community, we really thought it would address unemployment benefits, supplemental, the SNAP benefits. It would also help with paycheck protection program. It also would help with people who was unemployed who needed COBRA, which is health insurance, extensions, assistance there. What was some of the other big things? Paid leave. The HEROES bill also helped state and local governments, believe it or not. And so that was one of the other things too, as to why many was in support of it, because it was attempting to address issues locally in our local and state governments. And so that's sort of it. The HEROES bill, I can't say that I'm in favor of it. I think if they added some more layers to it, particularly SNAP, you guys, we support SNAP over here. So if they added, but what we did here is that McConnell left it out because it could be a bargaining chip. And so we're like, please, we can't do this to our babies. We can't do this to families who need resources, who need food on the table. So we're optimistic. I think one of the questions was what you guys can do locally. I would say this, all politics are local. And so whatever you can do, which is continue to email, continue to call, continue to You know, if you can go out to the offices and protest, I mean, all of it moves the needle in making sure members understand. The other thing is request those meetings one-on-one with your elected officials and ask them directly, like, why not now when we know what the numbers look like? You know, paint the picture, get stories from local families that are there in the district. From your local, you know, we use a lot of people from churches, from your trusted resources and churches and shelters and community-based organizations. They have to begin to tell the story to those elected officials. And then your state representatives, the state delegates and they have the ear of the congressional members. And so they can start saying, we feeling the heat here as it relates to it. I never tell people to put their vote on the block, but the thing is this, many of you are voters. Many of you are advocates, and so you have to let them know, like, this is something we really want for our communities, and continue to push it forward to see whether or not they can get McConnell and some of the other leaders of the Republican Party to move the needle on the issues that you care about most. And so that's pretty much my update for now. And I'm here for questions.
Thanks, Chonya. We've been trying to make the point that this isn't just a health crisis, it's a moral crisis. Are we going to help our neighbors who are hungry and who are in danger of homelessness or not? That's a real moral question. We met with the Chief of Staff for Mayor Crewson, the Mayor of St. Louis, yesterday to talk about the backlog of evictions that, you know, is in our courts now in St. Louis because of the eviction moratorium ending. And we're finding that a number of landlords are doing illegal evictions that they got tired of waiting for their money and they're not following the process and are doing kind of a self-help eviction, locking people out of their homes where that sometimes people can't get to their prescription medicines or the clothes that they need for work. So we were able to help pass an illegal evictions ordinance for the city of St. Louis in 2017 that's not being implemented very well. So we were reminding them that it was there and that we want that to be implemented better. How do you make that moral case on the Hill, Chonya?
Well, here's the thing. So the moral case to each member is very, you know, different. It's, you know, they feel, you know, some people bring their morals and their values to Capitol Hill, some don't. But I will say this, very early on in '99, when I first started on Capitol Hill, I went to church with my congressman. I'm not going to even tell y'all who my congressman is because y'all be like, he got values. But he was later convicted, probably 10 years later for something. But anyway, we actually went to church together. And I grew up in a family where we were not politically, my family wasn't active politically or anything. So I didn't even know how I was going to get to Capitol Hill. But we went to church together. And I just continued to call his office and say, hey, I want an internship. I want to work for my congressman. Like, this is a great opportunity. I was finishing up my master's program. But there are some inroads that you can make. Sometimes you have to find people who sit next to them in church and who can just tap their little hand and say, hey, you know, so-and-so. It has to be very personal for a lot of them on the other side. And even Democrats, they don't do everything right. They don't, you know, I never try to make it partisan. But the thing is there is a way in which you can appeal where you can make it real local. If there's someone you know, and people say it's 6 degrees of separation, you have to then start talking. What church do they go to? What grocery store do they go to? What dry cleaners do they go to? And so, but generally you can get a person at church, you know, who's their pastor? Like, who are they going through for moral, who's their confidant? Who are they going to for moral support? Who's the bishop? You know, who is it? And then you said, hey, we would love to meet with you. We're part of the faith community. We do it all the time for bread. We said, would you mind calling? And that's how our circle of protection and a lot of the other leaders, you know, our group is a faith-based group. So we get the pastors, we get the ushers on the line, we get whoever is connected to them to just speak about the issue now. You also have to know is that people have so many other competing interests. And when you're asking, and so all you can do is try to get to the person, do your due diligence, and then If you believe in the power of God, continue to pray. But sometimes some issues are not as ripe as we want them to be. And so sometimes members are just not hearing it. And so sometimes you need different things to happen within communities, news stories, op-eds about, you know, questioning their morals and values. And then they have to say, no, 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 this is what I believe. If you think about it, yesterday I sent something out for Brad about the George Floyd Policing Act. And, you know, I got a lot of messages back saying, well, you know, this is what, and somebody told me this is what my Republican members say. And it's true. Sometimes you have to work through the situation and you want to see everything laid out. And sometimes policy don't allow you to see that. And so some members are sitting there waiting, unfortunately, for leadership to respond. Some people are sitting there because McConnell or someone may have told them, just chill out. We got this. We still love the babies, you know, even though they're making us out to be monsters and this and that. So I just would say you definitely have to go local. You definitely have to find an inroad by seeing what church they go to, where they walk in the park. Do they walk in the evenings, you know, where they hang out at. You know, I meet a lot of my members. I live in Hoyer's district, but I used to work for him too. So when he sees me, I'm waving saying, hey, you know what our issue is, right? And I send letters and they were like, Chonya, we know who you are. Okay, I want y'all to keep knowing that my issue is always hunger, anti-hunger. So that's one of the things I would suggest is that you got to stay the course and find someone locally in their church that could appeal to that. You're on mute. Jeanette?
Yeah, other questions for Chonya? What's the timeline? What do you think is the key time for us to be reaching out?
So I think I saw that question. Honestly, congressional staff is not on break, even though members of Congress are, you know, on break. And they're really not on break. Right now, it's an election year. It just is. So I don't know who's working on local campaigns. That's a way in which you can insert your agenda and say, hey, there's a group over here who's very concerned about XYZ. That is a good way to insert your position and or your policy concerns on a campaign level and certainly be calling now locally. I mean, my thing is this: advocacy don't stop. Advocacy don't take a break. Members of Congress, and it may appear that they took a recess from policy making, but they're still negotiating. They're still hearing from members of Congress of what they think about certain issues. So I would say it's a continuous process. You don't stop because Congress is now in a recess sort of state. They're still operating. Their staff are still calculating who's calling, documenting it, saying we heard, you know, someone called from, you know, Empower, Missouri about XYZ. They're still taking those calls, and so you can still keep the pressure on.
Let's see, was there another question in the chat box, or was that the one? Okay. Any other questions for Chonya? I'm posting a link for a guest column that I wrote that appeared in the Columbia Daily Tribune about the moral health question. How do we respond to this huge crisis that we're in? Perhaps some of you on the phone can speak to the increase in you know, people coming to you for help. Is there someone that's doing some work with a food pantry or a food bank just now that would share with us just a little bit about what that's meant to your work?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that, Jeanette. Would you repeat that?
Oh, I was saying that I had posted a guest column that I wrote about that this is a moral crisis. How will we respond to hungry neighbors? And I wondered if somebody that is working to feed people right now could talk about what the pandemic has meant to your daily operations.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, when we're on calls with a lot of the other food banks. I'm Chad Higdon. I'm in St. Joseph, Missouri. We serve 15 Northwest Missouri counties and 4 Northeast Kansas counties, and there's 6 food banks that really cover the entire state with service territories that butt up against each other. But you know, it's been an astronomical jump. There's no doubt about it. There's certainly a lot of challenges. We're seeing at least 50% increase in our mobile distribution. Some of our mobile distributions are double the number of folks that are coming through, and that's pretty typical across the state. I think the one thing that has helped are just the number of federal programs that have popped up. We're seeing additional USDA commodities. We've got the coronavirus food assistance program with the farm to families boxes. We've seen some grants through Feeding America that have just made a tremendous impact. There's CARES Act funding for reimbursed food. So right now we've been able to keep up pretty well. We've been blessed to have the National Guard support, just to tell volunteers, just stay home, stay safe. And I think it makes everybody that's coming through our lines feel a lot safer to see, individuals in uniform passing out food and the safe practices that they're using. But, every day we're just trying to plan. Budgeting's been extremely hard just because you don't know when these programs are going to expire. And that's something we've shared with federal legislators. I actually testified before a congressional subcommittee last month on the federal government's response to the pandemic, and just finished up actually some questions that they asked me in response yesterday. And that's one of the things that I really shared in a couple of the comments was just the impact of SNAP and, the role of SNAP through the pandemic, and really how it we complement SNAP. It's not the other way around. Really, SNAP can reach everybody, and it changes to really to the needs of the economy. And so that was part of my messaging as I did that. But it's, right now we're doing okay, just keeping up with everything that's out there. But when, I shared some concerns with, what happens with when renters can start evicting people and utility bills come due and shutoffs start happening, and, these food programs start to go away, and just who knows, we don't know how long this is going to last and how long these programs, how long can the federal government just keep throwing money at these problems? Who knows? But, we're trying as best we can to keep up and just take it a day by day. But it's certainly been an eye-opening experience for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chad, for all that you and your agency is doing, and for testifying to Congress. That was very important. We read that in the paper and said, hey, we know him. So that was great. So are there any final questions for Chonya before we turn to Caitlin for a Missouri perspective? Well, thank you for being with us today, Chonya. You're welcome to stay to hear what Caitlin has to say, or if you need to rush off because of the circumstances in your household just now and needing to pay some attention to your family, that's okay as well. We do
I'm
appreciate
going to stick around because I like hearing the local issues. So I do appreciate you guys having Bread as a partner. Certainly you can feel free to learn about the issues that we are at a national level advocating for at bread.org. But I'm going to stick around to listen in. But I do appreciate you all, and thank you for all the work you're doing locally.
All right, great. And I don't know how many people know that Bread for the World has some new resources on their website related to racial equity, some really, really good materials there. So if you haven't looked at the Bread for the World website lately, check that out. I met your staff member that's kind of over that at one of the SNAP conferences, the national SNAP conferences, and really appreciated her. I'm blanking on her name right now, but it was my first.
Was it Marlisa Gamble? Marlisa Gamblin?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or
yeah.
Ozma? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Caitlin is with us from the Department of Social Services. There's lots of new announcements perhaps to share. I've been seeing some in my inbox this week. So Caitlin, we're anxious to hear what's new in our state response.
Sure. Thanks, Jeanette, for having me again. So I'm just going to try and highlight some of the newer information that's kind of come about this week and then take any questions. So we were able to announce again this week that Missouri got approved for PSNAP for September. So that's the maximum benefits for everybody already existing on SNAP. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from that. That's really helpful. So we're glad to be able to request that as long as we can. The next thing I wanted to address is ABOD work requirements. So we did get some additional guidance from the federal government this week around counting months for ABODs. And so the state has made the decision to not do ABOD SNAP work requirements. And we're still going to be doing some really aggressive outreach to try and connect people with employment opportunities and training. We're getting, frankly, a lot of employers reaching out that are kind of desperate for employees. So we're going to continue to push out messaging to all of our participants around, what we can offer them through the Skill Up program from an employment and training perspective. But we are not going to be doing any sanctions or anything like that. The final thing I want to highlight that's kind of changed since our last conversation or come up is the PEBT program. So Missouri was actually very fortunate that we were able to pretty successfully execute the first round of the PEBT program. I know some states weren't able to do that at all, and some states are still, frankly, working to distribute the PEBT benefits. And we were able to distribute that benefit to, I think it was over 200,000 kiddos and families. So we're very proud that we were able to do that. The federal government did announce this week that they were making available a PEBT round 2 of sorts. Unfortunately, the first round wasn't easy, and the second round's even harder. There are, frankly, a lot of strings attached, and the state is having to evaluate if it's even possible to execute that benefit. So just so folks understand, normally the department bears the brunt of eligibility determination for assistance programs, but the way that this PEBT round 2 is structured, the onus for eligibility lies solely on the school district. So basically they have to tell us on each individual student, not only if they are eligible from an income perspective, so if they're free or reduced lunch or would be free or reduced lunch, but we also have to know the days that they are in seat versus the days that they are virtual. And so since Missouri is really taking an individual approach to what is right for each district, there's absolutely no consistency. So it's just, we're really not sure that it's even possible to do that in Missouri. And the benefit is not, I think the max benefit is $100. And even when I was reading it, I had a lot of unanswered questions about if somebody applies. And the final thing is we have to have the entire benefit distributed by September 30th. So my question was, if somebody applies with us on the 1st and they're 50-50 in seat virtual, but then the school has to go all virtual due to coronavirus, do I have to go back and remediate that benefit? Or if they apply with me and they're all in seat and I deny them, is it their responsibility to come back through the door and reapply? So, there's just a lot of complexity to this program that kind of sets the states up to be unsuccessful. So I don't have a final decision to offer you on that, but I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the level of complexity for this version is extreme. And so, we are going to if the decision is made that we can't be successful and that we're not going to go down that path, I know that DESE has a lot of waivers from USD around their in-seat or around their school feeding programs. So we'll partner certainly to do outreach, whatever we can around some of those more local feeding options. I know they've got waivers on congregate eating. They can send home entire weeks of food at once. You don't have to distribute on a day-by-day basis. There are meal pattern waivers so that you can, send home the same meal for a second grader and a 12th grader. So there's a lot of flexibility from the schools on what they can do with their feeding programs. So, if that's the decision that PEBT, well, regardless, I mean, we'll do those, we'll execute whatever partnership we need to help out with schools, but really want to make sure we can do some outreach around local feeding options if PEBT is not, if we don't go down that path. So the only other thing I did want to touch on is, I know there's questions around individuals accessing benefits and kind of the trends that the department is seeing around, I'll speak to SNAP specifically. So for the first several months of the pandemic, we saw like an initial spike in applications, and then it plummeted back down, and our enrollment never substantially changed. Our assumption was that a lot of people applied prior to the $600 benefit being available. And then as unemployment started rolling out, since that was countable income, they became ineligible and ultimately did not access those benefits. I can tell you that we have felt the impact of the end of the $600 additional benefit. We saw basically 100% increase in our call volume to our call center. We did see an increase in our SNAP application rate. And so we've been trying to navigate the causes for that. Again, speculation would be that we saw that impact after, the unemployment went away, so that would have probably been a factor. I can tell you that Missouri is the third state in the country to actually start distributing the new round of unemployment. So the $300 federal bonus with the $100 state match. So they started distributing those benefits this week and are kind of playing catch up for a couple of weeks for the gap. And that the approvals for that unemployment benefit, you don't get like blanket approval for like a month even. You are requesting it on a week-by-week basis. So I know that the Department of Labor, and that's I'm playing a little outside of my ballpark, but the Department of Labor is working through that. So, I'm not sure, it's not as substantial of a benefit as the previous, so I'm not sure what that's going to how that's going to reflect in our actual benefit numbers, but we're certainly watching it and watching our call center numbers closely and thinking about, are there ways that we can make ourselves more available to folks trying to access benefits. Just anecdotally, I can tell you that the majority of the calls we've been getting have really been people asking about the status of their documents, because it's a lot of people who haven't dealt with our system before and so don't have those baseline expectations for how things work. So we've been trying to educate around kind of timeframes and processes. So that's kind of what I got. I know that was a lot, but happy to do my best to answer any questions.
Thanks, Caitlin. And maybe the problems with PEBT that you described as something that some of us on this call should do some administrative advocacy around, where we talk to Senator Blunt or Senator Hawley's office about going to FNS and saying, wait, you're making this hard for us to comply, and this is a really important kind of help with children not having easy access to consistent school meals. That's so important to reducing hunger in our state, and nutrition being, absolutely a building block for children's both physical and mental development. Food insecurity is one of the adverse childhood experiences that leads to toxic stress and arrested development of a child's brain. So we have to make sure that kids get food, obviously. If folks are interested in working on that together, you might let Christine know, and maybe we could put together a call with our federal legislators about that. Are there questions for Caitlin?
Caitlin, I know this is maybe out of your ball field, but the unemployment insurance, there's been a lot of conversation nationally about states kicking in the $100. I'm just trying to, like, do you know, is Missouri kicking in that 100, or I don't know what is allowed and not to be, like, it's out of my typical wheelhouse too.
So is a little bit outside of my ballpark, but I can tell you what I know, which is we have started administering that program. So that means we are doing something. What I don't know is if we are only, so you can be eligible for different amounts of unemployment based off of whatever you're missing. So what I don't know is if we're only distributing that extra benefit to people who are actually eligible for $100 worth of unemployment compensation based on their employment. I know a lot of the conversation from other states has been whether or not to use their CARES Act dollars to offer that match to everyone. And so what I don't know is if we're doing that. I know we're doing some level of distribution. I'm just unclear if it's only for people who are actually eligible for that $100, or if we started using our CARES Act dollars to make everyone eligible for the extra bonus. I don't know that answer.
That's actually really helpful. Thank you.
Other questions for Caitlin? Okay. Thanks, Caitlin, for being with us. And I did want to show just a few more resources here. Sarah Hackman is making us aware, too, of some special things going on at the community action agencies. They're sending to the legislator a full packet for the community action agency in their area related to hardships that people are experiencing, including hunger.
I can share a little bit more about that.
Please do. Go ahead, Sarah.
So this story packet, again, just highlights how agencies have responded. We're kind of trying to capture over time that some agencies have some individual specific stories in addition to the broader scope. And we'll be sending those to legislators, either the full packet or select agency stories that surround a certain theme. Plus also there are some partners, national partners, and then partners here in our state that have expressed interest in this as it's come up in conversation. So yes, definitely food is a theme across all of Missouri's 19 community action agencies and the need that they're seeing in their communities. And one story that I actually received just yesterday is from an agency in the northern part of our state. And it was specific, one aspect of it was specific to utility assistance. And just last week, this number just stood out to me. It's kind of crazy. The agency, and it's one of our smaller agencies, processed $32,000 worth of LIHEAP assistance in 1 week because a lot of those deferred energy bills, utility bills are coming due, and people with low incomes are faced with some big bills right now. And so folks are really, really seeking assistance. And then this week, from Monday to Wednesday, they had already processed $29,000 worth of LIHEAP assistance. So energy and utility assistance coming up big too.
Sarah, when you're talking about legislators, are you sending this to our congressmen and senators in DC or the state level ones, or both?
Both.
Okay, great.
Any questions for Sarah? All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry, JMO. This is Vicki, and I'm going to apologize up front. I'm going to have to hop off here in a second to get on another meeting, but I was interested, Sarah, are they hearing from people with disabilities? We have a few anecdotal stories, but we're trying to get a handle on across the state how people with developmental disabilities are impacted.
There are a few agencies that have highlighted a couple stories regarding people with developmental disabilities. And once this story packet is ready, I'd be glad to share it with the folks on this call and the folks at Empower Missouri, just to continue to cross-share information about how Missourians are impacted by COVID-19.
That would
Thank
be
you
great,
so
Sarah.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Should I send it to Christine or JMO?
Christine's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll send it to her.
Great. So I want to remind folks that there's some really great resources for you on our website. If you go under news and updates, you see a COVID-19 call to action page, and that has some just basic information. It has a take action now template that lets you write Senator Blunt and Senator Hawley. Please change the language that we put there so that it's very personal. Duplicate, messages that all look alike don't do nearly the good that a more personalized share does. There's also the Heroes and Heels chart that I put a link to earlier. That's actually from the Community Action Partnership. The MOCAN folks that Sarah's with shared this with us, and it's a very helpful piece that compares what's in the Heroes Act versus the Heels Act. So you can take a look at that. And then you also can get to a fact sheet that we co-published with the Coalition on Human Needs that talks about what the data is telling us about the increase in things like people not being able to make their rent payments or the amount of hunger in homes. 43% of Missouri households included someone who'd lost employment income between March 13th and June 23, according to the census. So this has really been hard on our state, and our state does not have a bunch of money reserves to help in a situation like this. We live real close to the bone, and we restricted our own ability to produce revenue in our state in multiple ways, so that we're $4 billion below our own revenue cap at the present time. So it's not like we have a way to respond to this unless the federal government helps us. So there's lots of good resources there, and be sure and take advantage of those. Then finally, I wanted to remind you also that we have an Empowering You webinar coming up on September 17th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. That's the theme of it is social justice at the ballot box. And the guest speakers will be Denise Lieberman from the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition and Nimrod Chappell Jr. from NAACP, talking about voter suppression and the importance of making sure that people can vote safely during this pandemic. So they'll be talking about that. Kathleen Farrell from the League of Women Voters will be talking about ways you can educate yourself. A lot of people often are like, well, how do I know how to vote on these judges, for example? So Kathleen will offer us some information about how to be an informed voter. How do you educate yourself before you go to vote? And Mary Timmel and Michael Whittier from the No on 3 Clean Missouri campaign will talk to us about the deceptive language that the legislators are trying to put on the ballot to fool us about what's in Amendment 3. Amendment 3 really takes away the clean government reforms, including nonpartisan redistricting, that we passed by a vote of 62% in 2018. So this is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and we want you all to vote no on 3. And this special webinar will prepare you to know all the facts on that and to educate your neighbors. It's really important that we get every social justice voter to the polls on November 3rd. So encourage people to come to this webinar, and there you can register at our events page. And then if you will put on your calendar now, we'll have our next food security meeting on September the 18th at 9 a.m. And you can find details about that on our events page and our Food Security Coalition page. Not yet until I tell Rico to put that on there, but that will be available and you can register there. And then that's how to get in touch with us. And we want to start reminding people that we really do depend on donations from folks for us to be here following what's going on in Jeff City and Washington, D.C., and networking with wonderful groups like Bread for the World to get things done. So we hope that you'll not only be a user of the information that we put out, but also a donor to us because we have a great staff and we want to be able to keep our services available to people in Missouri. Does anybody have a question for me? Okay. Well, I bet no one will complain if we end this call like 8 minutes early, because you can all use your 8 minutes, I'm sure. Thank you for all that you're doing to respond to the lack of basic human needs in your community. If we don't get the foundation right, if people aren't able to eat, if people are not able to stay safely sheltered, everything else falls apart. We've got to get the basic human needs piece right. And that's why Empower Missouri is here, reminding folks, let's get the basics right. So thank you for what you do. And we hope to see you on the 17th for the Social Justice at the Ballot Box webinar. And again, the next day for a food security meeting. Hopefully we'll have a successful report at that point on what happened when the senators got back from their August recess and hopefully took up some of those issues, like will we have a 15% increase in SNAP in some compromise bill between the HEROES Act and the HEALS Act. Hopefully we can have lots of contact with Senator Blunt and Senator Hawley over the next little bit. It's Mitch McConnell. It's going to have a lot to do with this, but we can't influence him because he's in Kentucky. He doesn't care what people in Missouri think exactly. But we can talk to our own senators and say, please help Mitch McConnell understand the desperate straits that we are in Missouri and take action now. So thank you for all that you're doing. We'll see you later.